Well,
Hey,
welcome to the program again. And today it is my great pleasure to have my good friend, Stephen Goldhar. I've known Stephen for, I guess, maybe 2 or 3 years now, and we've become very good friends. And just one thing, we won't talk about this in the interview, but Stephen is a computer expert. Maybe I
side.
shouldn't say that because he could have a career just helping people with their computers. And I know he's part of the family now. I couldn't live without Stephen's computer skills, but our friendship is much more important. But anyway, with that introductions, I turn it over to Stephen. Who is Stephen Goldhar?
Oh, what a what a very complicated question. Simple but yet complicated. Um, well, nice to be here talking with you. First of all, we've talked about this for a while, and finally we get a chance to do it. So happy to be here and have this discussion. I would first describe myself as a highly sensitive person, and my life has been full of challenges that made it important for me to discover how to be a highly sensitive person in a pretty insensitive world.
Mhm.
And it's been quite a journey. It really has been an adventure. There have been a lot of highs and things that I've done. I was an entrepreneur from a very young age, and I've worked with some pretty famous people, and and I've done a lot of things, a lot of fun things. Someone would look at my life and say I had a lot of friends and relationships, and I've got a wonderful son, and I've had a lot of privileged experiences, opportunities. And others would look who know me through my recovery and understand that through all those things, I really wasn't aware of how little I was actually being true to myself. And it didn't matter how many of these successes I had, I still felt inside kind of empty, sad, a fake, a failure. I mean, as an entrepreneur, I've had ups and downs, but I really didn't feel like I belonged in this world. And I didn't understand so much about what was going on for me. I was just knowing I wasn't feeling good, and I felt a need to hide that from most of the people in my life. I wanted to live up to their expectations of me as a bright, intelligent, charismatic, full of potential, and I tried my best. I tried my best, but I eventually crashed. Crashing is a very hard thing, as you know. I reached a point after, a very difficult divorce, and excuse me a second. Because of the stress that I put myself under for so long in survival mode, I was putting myself and my body in jeopardy. I was becoming more and more toxic with heavy metals and other toxins. I was taking medications for my ADHD, lots of them, to keep my body functioning, beyond what it normally could. And I wasn't really knowing how to even hold myself emotionally. I didn't understand the consequences of not being myself, of being a people pleaser, of being what I thought everybody else needed me to be.
Mm-hmm.
And one day my brain just wouldn't function anymore. I couldn't, no amount of medications would help this. And I had to tell the people I was working with at the time that I don't know why, but my symptoms, my brain fog, and other things going on in my body were at the point where I had to stop and start getting help. And it was a very disappointing moment. I had investors in my business pull out. I had borrowed money to, grow my business, and I was too much debt without working, without having to give that up, and having expensive medical treatments to start detoxing and chelating heavy metals out. I ended up just, within a couple of years claiming personal bankruptcy. I had to move in with my parents. It was a very shameful time for me. And all the things that I thought made me a good person, a valuable person, an important person, were pretty much gone in that moment. A lot of colleagues who I work with, I was known in the online marketing industry as being a pioneer and sought after to speak at conventions or events. And, most of those people, when I stopped doing what I was doing and they knew I was having a, sort of a physical and emotional meltdown, were kind of gone. And I was alone. It was so bad that at one point, I guess 3 years into that, it was the first time I remember praying, believing in something more than myself, believing that there's a God or something that, perhaps I can appeal to. And I said, I can't take this anymore. It's just too painful. I don't know, God, what I'm meant to be in this world, but at this point, I will accept anything, however small my life will be. It doesn't matter. I just want this pain to go away. What a moment that was. It was about a week later that I bumped into an old friend. Well, somebody who I've known, but his mother was a very dear person to me because she had a community around some holotropic breath work that she provided and did for years. And I was a seeker from my early 20s. And so that was one of the things I did to explore and get some of my emotions out and to discover more of who I was. And her son was someone who was the director of programming at the Omega Institute and had worked with a lot of well-known speakers. And he said, I'm building a new company with Eckhart Tolle, and it's called Eckhart Tolle TV. And we need help in marketing it. And could you help me with that? So I looked at what they're doing. And for me, that was like easy stuff, compared to the kind of clients and leading edge work I had to do. So I said, sure. And so started doing that. At that point, I was not making much money, just glad to be doing something. I didn't really know a lot about Eckhart at the time. I knew of his work, but I didn't know the extent of it. And I flew out to Vancouver. I met Eckhart, the team. They liked me. I was on the same wavelength, and that started me working with them as a, virtual director of marketing. I had to go and attend all their events. I helped them grow Eckhart Tolle TV. And eventually, over 4 years, I began to take on more and more responsibilities, even putting on events around the world, for 500 people and learning how to do that. And I also started, working with other people like Gary Zukav and his wonderful message from Seed of the Soul. And so it was an interesting opportunity. It was an interesting time for me because suddenly I went from feeling at my lowest to catapulting to working with people who people admired very much. And it felt really good to be around this kind of energy and people who were really appreciating what I did. Instead of marketing anything to people, I was helping to market something that was changing lives. And people would say that, thank you for what you do, Stephen, and your role in this. It's really changing my life. I got really close to the message as well. I took every opportunity to be at every talk, even in the front row, to learn Eckhart's teachings and what it meant to be present in the moment. Same with Gary Zukav, Journey to the Soul and all the events he put on in Oregon, and spent a lot of time with each. So that was a very privileged opportunity as well, and to really be close to those messages and do the work. I gained a lot of perspective on that. And however, it still wasn't taking away a lot of the inner pain and low self-esteem and the sadness that I was experiencing. And so it wasn't until years later, like maybe, 5 or 6 more years, that I started to learn that what I was lacking was self-love.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, do you want me to keep going with this? I know you asked me a question about, but is this
Yeah, you're doing really good. You're making my job. You're
okay?
answering all my questions.
Oh,
But
okay. Well,
carry on. Yeah,
okay.
yeah. No, it's interesting what you're saying. And
um, I just a little more, and then we'll stop and
okay.
we can go back and forth. But yeah, I realized that self-love was something that I've heard so many times
Mhm.
in so many ways, even thought I was doing it in ways that I could understand anyway. But I really wasn't getting it in a way like I needed to.
Mhm.
And so it was with the help of organizations like ACA and you as my sponsor that I began to understand what that language really looked like, began to see how it is that I do talk to myself,
Mhm.
how it feels inside, all the feelings that I had that I didn't even know I was having. I never stopped to really check in and understand what was going on and why. Beyond, the sensations of fear and sadness, I didn't really know all the nuances of all the things that were coming through me that I needed to really understand, all the parts of me that were calling out for attention, and how to hold those, how to be in relationship with those so they're not screaming out at me and controlling me, but I'm able to be in relationship with these things and acknowledge what those feelings are and what those needs are that I'm getting from those, and then how to express those needs into the world. So there was a lot to learn there, but that's been the beauty of my journey.
Mhm.
And so I'm so glad that, I'm here talking to you today, feeling very different than I was, even just a few short years ago. It just keeps growing and getting better. Um,
Yeah, well, thanks, Stephen. And that was a great introduction to who you are. And I think that I relate so much to your story, things that you said, like being a very sensitive person, what that's like, because I am too, and what it's like to go through those feelings of feeling fake, and to crashing, like I could go on. So many things that you talked about, I relate in my own life. And but anyway, it's been great to see your progress in this journey. And I mean, even looking at you right now, I mean, you're a totally different person than you were 3 years ago, because you used to be tense, and you could tell that you were bothered and questioning things and you didn't have the answers. Now you're a whole new person. You're confident and you look so peaceful, and it's real. It's not something you're putting on. This is a real change. And it's something that we kind of experience together, because I'm, like you mentioned, a journey. I'm on a journey as well too, and and it's great to be on the journey together. So, but one other thing that we have in common, because I know we've talked about this in the past, and that's ADHD. Because I have it, and I know you've talked about it. And I know, I think it was a month or two ago, you were the guest speaker of Wayne O'Brien's ADHD group, and you spoke. There was quite a few people there. So, do you want to talk a bit about how you have come, I guess, at peace with this thing that we have, ADHD? I know I've had my story, but it was really interesting what you had to say that evening. So, how have you come to deal with ADHD? What are your thoughts on that?
yeah, it's a good question. Well, ADHD is something that I've come to think of very differently now than I was. I was diagnosed later in life at 34, so that's pretty much 20 years ago now.
Mhm.
And at the time, it seemed like ADHD was a detriment. It was an inconvenience. It was something I had to manage it was something that I needed to hide. And because it was almost like, it felt like a disability. Like if I didn't take my meds, I'm not completely present and my mind isn't as completely focused. And I, felt some shame and embarrassment about that. I would hide if I had to take a med or a pill or something like that to help me. Although those things, the coaching that I received and the medications, it gave me a new chance at life as well. ADHD is a very interesting and complex diagnosis and trait. But most importantly, I now understand that it's a gift.
Mhm.
It's not a disability at all.
Mhm.
It's just a different way that the mind works. And um, and I have an ADHD coach that I still I go to, and is an interesting perspective on this, and it being part of the evolutionary process that ADHD people, some of the traits that I don't know about all, but a lot of us have in common is we're all very sensitive people.
Mhm.
And we all have creative minds, and we're all free spirits and free thinkers. And if we're just allowed to be,
Mhm.
these are wonderful, very helpful traits. We can solve problems and see things that many other people can't. I just look at my ability. That's one of the things people pay me for in my work as a business consultant and now as a life coach. That I get a lot of information. I can see the depth into situations.
Yeah.
And I can look at how to simplify things and make them and communicate them in more relatable ways, and really look at the essence of things. So I could look at the root of problems or situations, and I'm very solutions oriented. These are all, traits of ADHD. So rather than thinking how I'm going to be an ADHD person fitting into a non-ADHD world, which wasn't working for me very well, I now look at it as I'm an ADHD person who's living in a world that accepts and appreciates who I am and what I do. And so there's a lot of people and a lot of opportunities to do that. And so I'm learning where are those opportunities, what are those environments, what are the things I should do that is more conducive to the way I think and work and need to be, and the kind of relationships I need to have.
Yeah.
And that's part of the self-love process.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, Stephen. And it was interesting. You mentioned a gift because with me, I learned out that I had ADHD. I think it was about 25 years ago, and I didn't even know what the term meant. And my first contact with ADHD was I read Hollywell's book, Driven to Distraction. And when I read it, I was like reading my autobiography, like for the first time in my life. So this is why, and it was so freeing to realize, to understand why I was the way I was. But he was so positive, and he explained it as a gift. And right from the get-go, I've been looking at it as a gift. I never went through that stage where I looked at it like I was sick, I was deformed, I was going to have to suffer through life because I had this disease. I never went through that. I always looked at it as a gift. So for me, I'm thankful. And to this day, I think even more so, I look at it from the point of view, it's a gift. I have superpowers, and I appreciate that. Even though I have to realize I'm living in a world, like you mentioned, where people don't see things outside of the box like I do, so much so. So it can be difficult, but still, I'm so thankful I have this gift. But you touched on another thing that I also relate to, because for a lot of my life, I was suicidal. I was beating myself up. I hated myself. I blamed myself for all my problems. And quite literally, I hated myself. And it was just so irrational, really. It made no sense, but I was stuck. So I had to come to the point where I was able to forgive myself and then the process of self-love. And I've been on that journey now for 5, 6, 7 years, and it's been awesome. But I know that you touched on it. You said it was an issue with you. So how did you come to self-love?
What an interesting journey. I think out of all the things that I've discovered, and as I mentioned, I've been on a path of self-discovery for 30 years now. I've done a lot of things, a lot of courses, a lot of workshops, and work with the people later in my life, and got close to the message. But how it was that I was not able to really understand what self-love was, until just maybe a few years ago, it hasn't been that long, was very perplexing, mind-boggling, because it's not like that concept hasn't been taught to me. I did Course in Miracles work, which is about that, like in-depth stuff. Self-love is such an interesting thing because it means literally that you are able to see and be aware of all the things that are going on inside. You can't love something that you don't see. For most of us, because we didn't really know how to be a loving parent to ourselves or how to manage these parts of ourselves, we went into like survival and strategy mode, and our critical mind was sort of taking over a lot. When we're in that, part of our mind, it's really hard to see beyond that and even experience all the feelings. So, self-love is about accepting all of us. And one of the essential aspects of that was accepting all of my feelings. And I'm sure you remember clearly that that was my challenge when I first met you, was to really feel that all the things that I was feeling and experiencing as I discovered these things, it was important to learn to accept them instead of judge them. And that's one of the things, the roles that you were playing for me, to allow me to be vulnerable and express the things that I was sensing and feeling, and looking at how to hold them instead of shaming and judging them, how to hold them and be curious about them, have compassion for them. It was some hard stuff that, things that I've never really dealt with all my life. So over time, making more of these connections, what became evident was there was a process about self-love that I had to continue to learn and practice. And it's something that I've started to focus on more with a colleague of mine in a course that we've created, called 7 Steps to Self-Love. And it's, looking at, first of all, a way to take all of our feelings, because our feelings are, in essence, the very core of who we are. We don't choose our feelings. Mm-hmm. Our feelings happen to us. We experience our feelings. Our feelings, it's like our spirit talking to us all the time. We get tons of information about how we feel about what we're doing, about what we want, things we don't want, needs we have. It's all important information, but before we can get that information, I learned that we have to be able to hold those feelings, to be able to, long enough and in a loving way, to learn what it is that we're trying to get from those feelings. It's kind of like when observing, young children, watching them, like a baby's learning to walk and he suddenly falls down and hurts himself. He is aware that he's hurting, and he's then accepting that he fell down and it hurts. He's not saying to himself, I keep doing this. Why do I always do this? I'm so bad at walking. Like, what's the point? And he just doesn't do that.
Yeah.
It just accepts that I fell down and it hurts. And he can go right to self-compassion and say, wow, that was really hard. I want to learn how to do this better. And he can go right to what the need is. And it happens so quickly. You can see they just snap out of, not snap out of, but they move the energy from one side to the other, right to the need, and can let it go. And I realized that's what we were meant to do. Mm-hmm. Feel our feelings, be aware that we're having a feeling, accept that we're having that feeling, and it's okay to have that feeling or that experience, whatever it feels like, to try to be curious about it. And what is it that that feeling is telling me about what I'm experiencing or what I'm needing? Having compassion for that, loving ourselves for what it's like to feel that. Some of these more difficult feelings are, need some love and some compassion to be able to, be okay and hold that energy. And then we can look at what the need is, because every feeling has a need. So what do I need to do? What do I need to learn from this? What is that I want? And so self-love to me, in its totality, is being able to move through each of those stages.
Yeah.
Awareness, self-acceptance, self-compassion, and then self-expression, which is expressing our need, right?
Mm-hmm.
If we can do that, the energy goes through us and dissipates instead of being stopped in the middle and then goes and gets stored in our body, which is what happened. So that's the process that I've learned is required and that I've been practicing. And that's why it's making a difference. That's why over time I'm getting calmer. That's why over time I'm feeling more joy. And it's not based on any work I'm doing. It's not based on what I have or what I do or how people see me. It's just based on these parts of me that are normally so unsettled and afraid of the future and afraid of, me, whether I'm worthy of love or attention. As they know that we are, and I can love them, it's just like everyone's getting along inside a little better. And it's this nice calmness and this subtle joy. It's not like a high and it's not a low. And I'm aware of the feelings as they come up now, much more, where I can stop and say, oh, what's that about? Oh, what is it that I'm feeling? What is it that's going on? Why is that happening? What do I need? And it's a beautiful process. So
Yeah, well, you described that so well, Stephen. And I know we've kind of talked about this many times. And I relate to what you said. And I touched on a couple things. And for me, I was like you talked about being a people pleaser. Well, I was a huge people pleaser. And I was afraid of criticism. I was afraid to make a mistake because it was so painful. When I was a kid, when someone would criticize me, those early criticisms that I received, they cut through my heart and they just sent fear through me. So I became a people pleaser and I lived my life never to make a mistake. And so one of the things that kind of set me free was like the process you said, was just being able to accept myself as a human being, like I'm human and it's okay to make mistakes. And like I have to practice it, but when I make mistakes, I just say, well, I made a mistake. I'm not going to crucify myself or spend a couple of weeks beating myself up because I made a mistake. And what really helps me too is the work I do now, because I know it's so important to be human, to be able to be human, and to know it's okay to make mistakes. And for me, what you're talking about, the way I kind of describe, and you've heard me say this, the greatest success I've ever had is just being me. So whenever I meet somebody or whenever I'm doing anything, now I'm just being me. And it's so simple, but I don't feel that guilt anymore, that shame that, oh, maybe I made a mistake. Maybe somebody will take that wrong. Maybe somebody will be offended by what I say. Maybe I'm not perfect, and always kind of second guessing and, this false persona that I created. I just be me now, but it was a process I had to go through. And I just, life is quite simple now and quite beautiful from that aspect. And, just looking at you, I kind of see that process is taking, but it's really interesting that you've broken it down into those steps. But I think what you said, what we practice grows stronger. And you've been actually practicing this on a consistent basis for quite a while now, and it just gets better and it gets better and it will get better and better and better.
Yeah. I yesterday I had an experience. I was talking to a large group of people, and And I recognized after you were talking about being yourself and you love being yourself,
Yeah.
it's still kind of a new experience for me to
Yeah.
talk in front of people as myself, not how I think that they should see me. Like normally I would try to emulate the speakers
Yeah.
who I think are really polished and professional, or hold space and project themselves in the way that I think, works. And I
Yeah.
would try to be like them. And so, but I can't even do that anymore.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, but sometimes, a part of me that remembers the fear of being potentially different, or
Yeah.
seen as me as not being good enough, it pops up. And it popped up yesterday as I was having this talk, saying, are we doing a good enough job? Are we okay with what we're saying? And
Yeah.
are people getting enough out? So I needed validation after.
Yeah.
And now I know, how to honor that part and hold it. And I can give a certain amount of reassurance to that part that, hey, I love you no matter what.
Yeah.
And we're ourselves. And, whoever enjoys the way that we show up with them is good enough. And
Yeah.
not everybody has to like us. But then some of it is, and I think, because you're curious and you want to know,
Mhm.
and to make you feel no, I asked a few people who, were there in the recording, how was it for you? And I get feedback and I realized, oh, the things that this part was afraid of wasn't even real. And so I now know sometimes I can do that for these parts rather than hold it in and just let it fester and wonder. And the shame of letting people know that I wasn't feeling 100% secure about myself during it, that I was having some
Yeah.
doubts and fears, and that was never okay to show weakness. But now I know it's not only okay, it's important to be
Yeah.
able to let those parts be seen by somebody. Doesn't mean I have to, say that in front of everybody, but
Yeah.
somewhere along the way, how I judge happiness actually, it's a new model that I, overall, it's let's just call it the self-authenticity scale.
Oh, yeah.
And like on a meter from 1 to 100, how much of the time am I being truly me? And when I was in my 20s,
Yeah.
I would say, maybe 20% of the time,
Yeah.
um, and now, it's really hard to know, but I know I'm over the 50% mark. And I think that's why I'm experiencing a little more peace and joy, because it's like things I just described where I'm having experiences that normally I might be feeling ashamed of and keep to myself. I'm learning that there's no shame in me. This is me.
Yeah.
And it's normal. It's okay to have these thoughts and feelings come up, that show that we're human and we make mistakes and we're vulnerable. And now I look at how am I going to bring that out into the world with somebody in some situation rather than hide. And how do you feel you are in that scale, if I can ask? How much of the time do you think? Have you ever thought about how much of the time you're you now?
That's a really good question and a really good analogy. I'd never heard of that before, but I think I'm pretty much. I'd like to say 100%, but one thing that's kind of funny, but the more I become myself, the more real it's becoming, and it's kind of like consistent. And I've been, in a really good place now for quite a long time. I'd say a good 4 or 5 years. It gets better all the time. So anyway, I have a really good friend who knows me really well. He knew me when I was going through a rough time, and he keeps reminding me, like, Robert, tough times are coming. It's not always going to be, good. He says it's kind of like you've been on a pink cloud. So he said this a number of years ago. So I kind of now I joke with him. I say, this is Robert calling from the pink cloud. And I even thought I was gonna start a group called the Pink Cloud Society of those who have recovered, and feel like they're in a good place, But anyway, I I just take now I just live in the moment. That's one thing I've learned. And like I know things can happen in your life. You could get in a car accident. You could be diagnosed with cancer. Things can happen that really suck. But I don't worry about that. I just worry about the moment. And right now, I'm in a better place than I've ever been. Like, I remember those hard days when I was beating myself up, when I was depressed, when I was suicidal. I'll never forget that. But I don't regret those days because I learned so much from it. But I, I would, I would say I'm pretty much up at the top of the scale. I, uh, I do have those, like you're saying, those feelings sometimes where I'm kind of tested, but still, it doesn't really threaten that equanimity that I have, that overall trust I have in my higher power, say, for example, and my confidence of being able to handle no matter what life throws at me. There's a real solid core now that I have that I just don't kind of see it being threatened, even though I'm not bragging or boasting, and if it comes, it comes. But I feel pretty confident in what I have, that it's real and it's going to remain real. So
Yeah, you know what they're reminding me of is the struggle of working with the critical mind, with the critical parent or the survival
yeah,
brain. Um, it's been managing our lives, like it's been driving the boat
yeah,
for so many years that suddenly when we realize that we don't want to come from, this limited place of
yeah,
fear
yeah.
and protection, um, it doesn't always want to let go right away.
Hmm.
Ever notice that?
Yeah,
So another part of this journey was in really taking a look at my perspective of my relationship with that part of my mind.
yeah,
I've remember people used to talk about the ego and that part of the brain as being something that was sort of devilish, that's working against you. That, this is what, I remember learning, that you got to take control over this part of the mind, and you've got to,
mhm,
not listen to it. And it was sort of like struggle with it, but it never really worked for me. It always won out eventually, and it'd be exhausting. So one of the things actually you partly told me, taught me this as well, was look at it like a friend. Try having more compassion for this. And I've developed such a different relationship with it now, and I understand it more. It's this part of our brain that we put in control, sometimes not directly knowing or remembering how we did that, but
mhm,
if you have think of our body like we're a company, an organization, and the CEO who's supposed to be running things is not present for whatever reason. You think that we're not good enough as a CEO, and people have been, telling you don't really know what's good for yourself and what's good for your company. And so you think, I just better disappear. And so the CFO, who's in charge of accounting, suddenly has to fill in for you. And the CFO has got a limited view of a company from a financial and accounting perspective, and suddenly he's dealing with, people and relationships and internal systems and customers and things that it has nothing, doesn't know. It's doing its best, but yet we ask this part of us to step in, so that we have all these things coming at us saying, you're not good enough, and what are you doing, and I don't like you like this, and you're and the critical mind comes in and says, okay, I'll deal with this. Let's not do this anymore. Let's not do this behavior anymore. Let's say this to this person, and we survive, and it works.
mhm.
This person's hitting us or abusing us when we show up as ourselves, so let's give them what they want, or let's make sure we disappear, or let's do, and thank God. So we give this part of our brain the job of running the ship, running the company. Then one day we realize, well, this may be not always working to our best interest.
Mhm.
I'd like to go out and meet more people. When I try to go to a party or something, this critical brain says, hey, it's not safe. Remember, people don't like you. You're different. And so you're going to be shamed or judged, or you're going to feel awkward
Yeah,
and stand in the corner, but yet, from its perspective, that is very real. But it cannot see the bigger picture, which is, but we need more connection in our lives. We
mhm,
need more people. I want to interact with more people. And so when we realize that we can honor those feelings for connection,
mhm.
and we look at how how the critical mind is looking at this differently, it's like we need to rebuild that relationship. And one thing I've discovered, Robert, this part of our mind, it doesn't actually want that job. It never wanted the job. It's like the CFO of a company realizing the CEO is not there anymore. It says, well, I'm the next in line. I got to step in, from my limited perspective, I've got to run this company. And sure, the company's not doing as well as it should. There's been fires in the kitchen. There's been customers who are, not happy with things, and people internally are not feeling like they're being seen or heard. They're not enjoying their job, but the company's afloat and we're alive. And suddenly the CEO comes back. We realize, I think I want to run the ship again. I don't believe all these people telling me I'm not good enough to run this company or, and so I come back and suddenly, you got a CFO in charge, and you don't want to just say, you know what, you've done a terrible job. How dare you look at this? You're fired. Get out. It wouldn't do that, and so, and plus, it's got signing authority now, so you can't just kick them out. So what you do is you say, I thank you for taking over.
Yeah.
Thank you for taking over. Like you got us through that part. When I was unaware of how to show up and act as a CEO of my own self, you got us through. Thank you. Now I'm going to show us how to make this even better. And the CFO or this part of you can imagine when they hear that, it's like, well, I'm not sure about that. You certainly haven't been here so far. How do I know you're going to do this better now? It's okay. I've got this. Just watch.
Yeah.
And so you ask for times for cooperation, and you say, I know you're afraid of me going to this party, but I'm different now. And I know how to find the people who are like me, and I know how to talk to them better. And watch what happens and say, okay, we're going to watch. And it's watching skeptical. It's, you're going and it's reminding you, this is a dangerous situation. Watch out for that person. He looks like an aggressive character over there, very judgmental. But by the end of the night, when that part of their mind sees that it was okay, that you were able to hold even the younger parts that were feeling afraid and talk to them and say, it's okay. I love you for all your feelings and you have every right to feel that way. But now you can be here with me as I'm talking to people in this new way, and look at how we're being accepted and loved. And so it takes time, but these parts of us start to trust us.
Yeah.
And the loving parent starts to be able to do more and more. And we never want to say goodbye to the critical parent or the part of our mind.
Yeah.
I've learned that it's such an important part of us. It still reminds me when I'm, walking along on a road where it's uneven and I have to be careful where I step, or there's holes, and we want to be aware, but we want to be in relationship. I want it back in the role as the CFO.
Yeah.
There's specific things I want you on my board to advise us, because you're really good at certain things. And I want you to know how much I appreciate you. And thank you for your trust. And thank you for watching things while I was away.
Yeah. Well, that was such a great description, Stephen. And what you were talking about, I think, is something that I believe very deeply, and something I teach in some of my workshops, and that's our self-talk. The things we say to ourselves, the things we think about, are creating our destiny, by our self-talk. And I think what you just described was just an awesome description of that, how you relate to yourself.
That was the self-love. That was the self-love that you were asking about. That is a culmination of how we self-love. And another way of describing it, it's integrating all the parts of us in harmony.
Yeah.
Every part of us has a purpose, and nothing is bad. We just look at with curiosity, what's your role and how can I support you? And I have this thing coming up now. How can I support that? This part of my mind's going, oh, how can I support you?
Yeah.
It's having an integrated experience.
Yeah. That's an integrated experience. Yeah, that's perfect. I'm just looking at the clock here, but one question I wanted to ask you, because I know your career is going really well. You've had a big career change from the Eckhart Tolle days, but one of the things that you're doing now, I would like to ask you about, and I think our audience would be interested, and that's a program. I think you called it the 7 Steps of Healthy Love, if I'm correct.
Yeah, so it's the Healthy Love program.
Okay.
And one of the courses that we just gave was 7 Steps to Self-Love.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you want to talk a bit about that program? Just give us the skinny on what the program is all about and your role and who you work with doing that.
Yeah, sure. So I'm working with someone I've known, since the early days, like 10 years ago when I was working with Eckhart. She was in relationship with the gentleman who approached me to first start working with them, and that her name is Rachel Levy, and she's a licensed mental health counselor and a psychotherapist and a magotherapist, someone who worked with Debbie Ford and did a lot of shadow work training, and has been involved in 12-step programs and work in supporting people. So she's been around doing this work for a long time, and she created the Healthy Love program about 10 years ago, and I knew her and I was supporting her in a business consulting fashion. But together we decided to become partners on bringing the Healthy Love program out and expanding it and creating more courses. So we started off with this first course, the 7 Steps to Self-Love, which is where I get the new framework that I was discussing before of the various steps or stages that we need to go through to understand how to hold ourselves through all the experiences and feelings we have, and to be able to look at each one and to isolate the important components and know what is it like to hold that space. So first one was self-honesty. So there's more steps than the ones I talked about. It's just becoming aware that there's serious incongruencies in our life and things that aren't working. It's like admitting I've got a problem. And that problem doesn't always mean that, just an ordinary addiction, because that's a problem too, but it could mean my relationships just aren't working as hard as I try. I can't seem to, hold a job down, no matter what I do. I'm whatever it is, it's like we come to this place where we know it's not working. And rather than fighting and thinking that it's just needs more time and more effort, taking a step back and saying, I'd like to figure out a different way. Self-honesty, really important.
Mhm.
Then the part that I talked about, self-awareness, becoming aware of what the experiences that we're having are, on a regular basis, these feelings that we've been probably ignoring, these things about ourselves and the way we talk to ourselves that we just allow to happen because it's been normal for us. We just so used to it. Looking at, what self-worth is, and how to hold ourselves in that so that we can see ourselves differently and work with ourselves differently. Looking at what self-acceptance is and what it feels like to really accept all the things that we're realizing about ourselves, and looking how it's not like our fault like we thought. If you're grown up in a certain environment and you're treated a certain way and you began to think in a certain way and you weren't seen, you weren't validated as much as we needed, this is what happens, especially if you're highly sensitive, and you feel so many things, but yet the way people act, it's like it sort of makes us feel like we must be crazy because we're feeling and sensing things being one way, and they're saying this is not only that way, but you're imagining the whole thing. I'm not upset or angry, or I'm not, and it just, we don't know what to believe anymore. So that acceptance is so important.
Mhm.
Learning to hold what compassion is. It's not straightforward always. It wasn't for me what self-compassion is and what it feels like to watch myself going through all these experiences where I don't feel like I'm really understood or seen. And I'm being really hard on myself and not knowing, why I'm doing that, or the real consequences and how deep that feeling runs. It's learning to love that because I can understand where that came from now. And I can really hold those feelings now more than before. Part of this process, in another way, is helping to create the capacity for the people going through this program to be able to hold more of their feelings. Self-love and the whole self-love journey is in another way to put it, is the capacity to hold all of ourselves. It's not just being aware of all of ourselves, but if things get pretty dark and some of the things come up, get difficult, we need to hold that feeling long enough to be able to be curious about and understand where that's from, why we're feeling those things, to give it some love and compassion, and to look at what it needs. And so I think that's why the hundreds of hours I spent with Eckhart learning about being present. I mean, I understood the concept really well, but what Eckhart doesn't teach, which is important for not everybody, but people like me and maybe, you, and we share these things, was that whatever comes up in the present moment when it's uncomfortable, in order to be in the present moment, we need to know how to hold that and to be in relationship with it through self-love. And so if we don't have that ability, trying to practice being present is not going to really work. You're going to have these parts that are just going to not want to be in those feeling places, and you're going to get a lot of resistance. And so I needed to, now that I understand this process and I look at the things that Eckhart teaches, I really have a different and deeper understanding for it. I think the people who come into his work who have a certain amount of self-love can probably get more out of it, initially than the people like myself. And I know there are a lot of people like this who just don't have the self-love, who would find it a struggle. And so, and then the last part of this is the self-expression stage. It's the part that needs to be expressed where we're being authentic. Remember, we talked about the self-authenticity meter, where we are on that scale.
Yeah.
That's the way we actually become more authentic, is when we realize who we are, what our experience is, we accept it, we love it, we're willing to talk about it and share it because it's part of us. And now we know it's okay. We're not shamed by it anymore. And so we can say it. How do you say it? And that's probably one of the hardest challenges of them all.
Yeah.
Because self-expression, expressing your needs or your views or who you are, requires that you think about a lot of variables. Who's my audience? How open are they to receiving this? And what's the best time to do it? What's the best way to communicate it? And you want to set yourself up to know how to get the best chances of being received well. And if you don't get that need met, if you have enough self-love, you'll find other ways, and it's okay. You're not hard on yourself, but you want to do the best you can. And that's where things like NVC, nonviolent communication, help. That's wonderful work. Marshall Rosenberg's work is wonderful on just taking that aspect of looking at your feelings through to the need and looking at how to get that need met by learning how to communicate, from the I position and giving yourself a better chance of getting a better outcome, from that. So the course that we've created covers all of that. It takes us through each part of that, from self-honesty through to self-expression in 7 steps, looking at each one. What are the nuances? What are the ways that it looks like? What's the practical way of dealing with it? What's the things we need to become aware of? And the last thing I want to say about it is we encourage to do this work with somebody else, at least one other person. The other thing about the self-love journey that's important to know is we can't do it alone. And I know you know this because it's similar to ACA work. And that's why, the 12-step program works so well to learn these things, even self-love. We can't do it alone. We can't, we don't have the ability to hold ourselves in reality of what our experience is without judging us, without somebody who's there to hold the feeling with us. And when we first learn how much we're feeling and we come across some difficult moments, we need help until we build those structures ourselves, until we build ourselves to be able to go from one end to the other and let go of the feeling and the energy to where it's supposed to go. So we encourage it to be done in that way. And so it's a wonderful program. And we're going to be offering it again and looking at, other programs to support that kind of thinking.
Sounds like an incredible program, and I related to everything you said. Just out of curiosity, though, when you said you suggest that you do it alone. Like, does that mean like a couple do it together, or like I'm a single guy? Like, if I were to take the program, like, how would I do it with somebody else?
We suggest having what we call a process partner. And that means that there's somebody that you're committed to in the
Yeah.
self-love process that's going to hold you and you're going to hold them. It could
Okay.
be it could be your partner. That's wonderful. I mean, it's great to do this work. We've
Yeah.
done it with some couples who are attending, and it's wonderful. And if you
Yeah.
don't have a partner to do it with, it could be with somebody else that you wants to go through the same experience to be helped.
Yeah.
Just
Okay.
making that commitment to hold each other. So
Yeah.
there's many ways to do it.
Yeah. It was interesting what you said, like about Eckhart Tolle, um, uh, because I remember when I was going through the valley of the shadow of death, and you've heard me say it many times, when I was lower in a snake's belly, and I really was. But people would give me books, and one of the books that people gave me was "The Power of Now" by Eckhart Tolle, and I couldn't read it, and I could kind of understand what he was saying, but I just didn't relate. It didn't help me. It didn't do anything for me at the time, and just about all the other books that people were giving me. But
Yeah.
a few years later, when I was on the road to recovery, I remember seeing an interview with Larry King and Eckhart Tolle, and it just blew me away. I totally related to everything he said, and it's kind of been a part of my recovery. But I had to kind of be on the path before I could understand it. Maybe it's part of being a super sensitive person, or maybe it's just when you're so depressed, you kind of need other things. And I found help through like ACA and 12-step groups and things like that. I found my own path, and I think we all do. So
Yeah, you needed more self-love at the time, I'm sure.
yeah, absolutely, yeah,
Yeah, yeah. And that's the other thing about this thing is, I've had people ask, what do you do to encourage someone to do this work, and someone who needs more self-love? And my answer was, well, everybody has their own time and their
yeah,
own time. And I really mean that. And you
yeah,
could look at someone who's suffering and
yeah,
feel sad for them or fear for them or whatever, comes up for us. But a lot of that is necessary to open
hmm,
up that door. So you can show them the door. They have to
yeah,
choose to walk through it. One of the best ways to show them the door, or even the benefit of the process, is to model it for them.
hmm,
Show up doing the work that you've learned to do, what it's like to be yourself with them and to
hmm,
be authentic and a little more vulnerable and share
yeah,
parts of yourself. And hopefully they'll notice
hmm,
and think, wow, you're so open now and you look so happy and calm. And what's that about?
yeah,
And that's a great way to help someone through the door,
yeah,
to help them realize, what can become
hmm,
possible for them to experience and feel. And
yeah,
yeah, and
yeah.
model. You did that for me so well. I will always
Thank you.
remember my first impressions of you coming into ACA. You're someone who talked about a very difficult story. Like when I heard about how low you were at one time, which I can relate to because I've been that low, but it'd only been 2 years and you were out of that and you seemed so stable from meeting to meeting. You seemed to really, embody something that I didn't see in a lot of people I'd been doing this work with for years.
Yeah,
People who'd be doing the weekend workshop kind of thing and doing the something here and something there. And there was something different. And then I not only heard it from you, but I heard it from some other people in ACA. And I noticed these people whose energy seemed uplifting,
mhm,
and they were happy with themselves and the words that they used to describe themselves. Like, how did they make this much progress in such a short amount of time, is what I was thinking.
yeah,
I almost didn't believe it was happening until I got to know you. And I remember I asked you to become my sponsor because,
yeah,
you were like a role model to me.
hmm,
You told me, what it was like for you to hold yourself in these feelings, and that now you have a relationship with these parts and you can feel these things, and you weren't, afraid of what other people were thinking about you. And it was
yeah,
just showing me what was possible.
yeah.
Yeah. I'm grateful to you for that.
Oh, Yeah, and I'm grateful for you. And you know, I've learned so much from you as well. And it's just really, really great. And just one thing that brought to my mind was Anthony Robbins. One thing he said, you need a model, you know, because you need to know that it's possible. You need to have somebody in your life that's done it so you know it's possible. And I think that's a big thing too, you know,
Yeah.
like, and I think that's why AA works, because every week people get up and they tell, you know, how bad it was, what happened and what it's like now. And it's just kind of like inspiring people like, hey, if somebody else can do it, then it's possible, you know, and we inspire each other. So
Well,
I think one of the big things is community that we have, you know, and now we've become a community. Like you and me are really good friends, and we help each other. And it's really great that now we're both helping other people, you know. And you know, I've never had a career or anything that I've been as happy with than what I'm doing now. I'm a peer support worker, as people know. So anyway,
yeah,
I'm just looking at the clock here, Stephen, and I mean we could go on for hours. But anyway, like at a meeting we say we check out. So, what are your final words for the audience? Something you'd just like to sign off with?
I really enjoy the experience of being able to come and speak about, um, you know, about my experience, my life, something that I think will help others, and that I can show up and be myself. It's a new experience, even for me. I love the fact that I can be a coach now to people and give them hope and show them how to navigate all the steps, and that it's possible. I I I love the experience of connecting with people like you, in a way that I feel uplifted after. Instead of being drained, I could spend time with you on here and feel, wow, this has been a great experience, and I got energy from it. So I'm grateful for the opportunity. I'm grateful that you're doing this and you're doing your podcast and you're putting yourself out into the world. And I'm part of that now. And so thank you for the opportunity. And I've really enjoyed being here and speaking with you.
Yeah, well, thanks so much, Stephen, for showing up. Thanks so much for being willing. And this has been a great interview. And so I just want to end say, I love you, Guy. And that's it.
Love you too, Robert.
Okay.
We'll talk soon.